coming up.
Many of our customers are selling their extra females. They're getting a pretty good premium, sometimes $200 on the bred heifers and 10, 15, 20 cents over steer price.
And we can feed these cattle 60 days of grain rather than 140 days of grain and still run 80-90% choice.
Hear the story of one of the most successful low-input beef programs in the business next on The American Rancher. Hello and welcome to The American Rancher. I'm Pam Minnick. Today we're in Palmer, Kansas at Ohlde Cattle Company, where Tim, Trudy, and their son Jake have developed one of the lowest input beef seed stock programs in the industry. Ohlde cattle can finish on grain or grass, which is attractive to grass finishing programs and translates into commercial cows that require less feed to maintain body condition scores. The Ohldes have a lifelong passion for raising cattle, and now their cattle are in demand by ranchers across the country.
My mom always said I went to sleep at night when I was 8 years old with a cow book in my hand, and she'd go to bed and take the book out of my hand and set it out from underneath the covers. I even did it with a flashlight because I wasn't supposed to be doing it. So I had that passion, and I've still got that passion. You know, I could retire. I'm 70, but I enjoy almost every day what I do. I met my wife in the mid-'80s. She was a student at Cal Poly University, and I saw her working her butt off. So I kept my eyes on anybody that could work and had a passion, and so I talked her into coming out and doing an internship, and she did.
I got involved because my love for animals from the day I was born. I think I said horse before I said anything else. Kind of went on through college with an animal science degree and an ag education degree as an undergrad. And then I went on to K-State and got a master's degree in growth and development and reproduction, but actually ended up joining Tim with the operation, and I guess you'd say the rest is history.
We really tried to make sure that what we sell people is what they need, and we'll correct what they need or keep what they've got. And Trudy's very good at that on the phone with semen or whatever, and they'll say, well, I want to use this bull. And Trudy says, well, what are you wanting to do? You want them less size? You want better udders? And she will steer them which way she feels they should do it. And then they might call me up and say, what do you think? And I'll say whatever Trudy said, because it'd probably be the same.
Many people are at the stage right now that they're confused. They're reading EPDs, they're listening to the marketing, pressures of all different things and stuff, and they're not sure which direction to go. And the selections that they make right now will affect them for many years to come, especially if they're keeping their own replacement females. And if they use a bull, whether it be AI or natural, right now, if then they keep the females, that can affect them as many as 10 years down the road. If those females stay in the herd to be 8 to 10 years old, those cattle that don't really cut it still tend to stay in the herd because it's expensive to raise a replacement. You've got 2 more years in a calf to get it into production versus a cow that may be eating you out of house and home, but she's still producing.
You know, we got a lot of this industry forces EPDs and numbers and bigness and growth, and not a lot on total profitability. And so we get caught up in that. And so the people that can read numbers, I think especially the younger people, you know, it's hard to use their eyeball to evaluate their cattle. You know, not just in conformation, but in longevity, fleshing. You know, when you say she's feminine, you know, she's deep flank, she's easy keeping, that ain't a number.
Up next.
In order to get cattle to finish on grass, genetics is a very important part of it.
See how Ohlde beef genetics match up to important shifts in consumer demand. That's after the break here on The American Rancher. Welcome back to The American Rancher. Recent shifts in beef consumer demands are here to stay. And with 40 years of successful low-input beef genetic development, Ohlde Cattle Company is in the right place at the right time.
So we kind of got 4 lines. We have basically the registered Angus, which is still the same closed line of cattle. We have the Angus 2s, which are the combinate mostly Angus Friesian using the same Angus bloodlines. We have the Fleck, we call them with Fleckvieh Angus, which again, Fleckvieh is a strain of Simmental, a little more beef type. And then we've kind of delved into a heat tolerant where we've brought Angus, a little Fleck and a little Centipole. So we gain a little bone and structure over the Centipoles. We get the heat tolerance of the Centipole. Really moderate, but extremely slick-haired to work in the fescue, and the southern deal is an alternative to Brahman cattle. So those are a 1/4 and 1/8 Centipole, which go to the Indama cattle from Africa, which are very resistant to worms and insects and everything. He's a bull called Texas Red, 1/4 Centipole, 3/4 Red Angus, and very slick. He's kind of where we like. We sell a lot of his sons that'll be 8 Centipole. He actually, a lot of people think he's just a Red Angus bull, and we kind of say, well, that's what he is with slicker hair, but he's got a little heterosis with the Centipole. Very good bull, very easy calving, very low birth weight, 65, 75 pound calves. This bull just came off of breeding 60 cows 2 weeks ago in the fall, and he ran with 40 cows last spring. So he ran 100 cows in about 7 months. And he still held his condition extremely well. Very easy keeping bull. I wanted to make my composite better than Angus. Not bigger than Angus, not growthier than Angus, better. And so the Friesian probably first. I wanted them tighter udders. There you can see the balance of the udder. Perfectly level, very small teats, just like a 2-year-old. Better feet and legs, more longevity, more soundness, more fertility, and that 1/8 to 16th does it. Then we decided to flex because they're probably as functional as the Friesians, so they're the most popular breed in the world in most countries in Europe. And there's a reason. If a breed's good, they populate. They spread all over the world, and that's where Fleckviehs are found in like 60 countries. So we've done the same with them. Same Angus with a little Fleckvieh. Those cattle might have a little more bone, maybe a little more growth, not a lot. Kept the birth weight still down, but this way we can utilize heterosis, which everybody knows heterosis does some things, a little more weaning, mainly an extra couple years of calves out of cows, maybe 1 or 2 more calves, a little more fertility. That way we have guys that have used a straight Angus, and now they use the Angus 2 for 6, 8 years. Now they come to you, put the flex on them, and when they get done with that, they go back and put a straight Angus bull on them again. I wanted to make these cattle work on forage. I really believe, and a lot of it was preached into me on my travels to Europe and Argentina, where their forage developed, and they had to have a lot of gut, a lot of capacity, rumen capacity. I will give up some pounds to do this, but the reality is cost of production.
In order to make a profit, you've got to keep your cow cost down, or your input cost. The highest input cost is feed. So the Ohlde Cattle Company genetics are producing females that will go back into nearly any environment and produce well. Longevity is very important, and we try to breed that into them as well.
So you got right there together a purebred Angus, 1/8 Fleck, and about a 1/8 16th Friesian. They just get better every year, more uniform. To me, better is uniformity, not bigger. We like, more than anything, is extreme uniformity. I don't want one bigger or a lot smaller. We just, same in our bulls, we like to have them all exact, kind of the same dimension. I want a tremendous amount of middle in them. Some of the smarter people I ever met in Argentina, they always said, "I get behind them, I want to see a foot of belly stick out on both sides." And of course, they're 7, 8 months pregnant now, but you can see about a foot of belly sticking out on both sides. But you can see how tremendous body condition they are, and they're just eating this cover crop. So not a bunch of expensive silage or grain or cake or cubes or distillers. I mean, they look like they've been on silage or grain, and they're not. The feed yards want to feed more days, they make money selling grain and yardage. So if they can feed cattle 180 versus 120, they're in favor of it. So that's what they do. And if the cost of gain is 70 cents and the cattle are $1.10, you think, oh, you're making more money. So what you tend to do is you select for cattle that are able to go to 1,700 pounds. The problem is, in respect to relationships of ribeye area per hundredweight of carcass, you start getting into 16, 17-inch ribeyes. And now the major meat people are saying, whoa, we got a little too big a ribeye maybe. We want a thicker steak than a little narrow steak. So if we can get a nice round steak this big, that's better than a big flat steak 2 inches, 3 inches bigger. Now, not everybody will agree, but most of the retailers selling it, people ain't got the money to buy 20-ounce steaks. So we got good ribeye, we got good muscle, and our cattle show it. And we can feed these cattle 60 days of grain rather than 140 days of grain and still run 80, 90% choice.
We have gotten to the place in the beef industry where we've perhaps even selected for too much growth and translated into cuts of beef that are too big. People desire smaller portions these days. And the Ohlde cattle have a tremendous amounts of muscle and ribeye. They're probably the number one cattle for, if you relate yearling weight and ribeye area, they're probably number one in that category. But the ribeye areas, if you're thinking about steaks, for example, are in a size that's consumable.
Easy fleshing Ohlde cattle have significant market advantages, including grass finishing in one of the fastest growing segments of the beef industry.
Grass finishing genetics is a very important part of the beef industry today. It's increased dramatically in the last several years, and this last year with the COVID has even stressed it even more. There's been more interest in farm to market. People want to know where their food is coming from, and they want to know that the beef that they're eating is coming from sustainable type programs. And in order to get cattle to finish on grass, genetics is a very important part of it. The beef have to be cattle that can actually finish on a grass or forage basis. The cattle that we are producing can do that. The Ohlde genetics are accounting for probably about 80% of the successful grass finishing programs today. Ohlde Cattle Company genetics finish easily on grass. The low input, easy fleshing cattle will finish out before they're 2 years old, and that's a very different type of animal than what it goes into the feedlot and is fed grain today.
After the break,
If the commercial cattleman can't make a living with his cow herd, then there isn't a beef industry.
take a closer look at one of Ohlde Cattle Company's most important breeding philosophies. That's after the break here on The American Rancher. Stay with us. Welcome back to The American Rancher. After decades of developing their low-input beef genetics program, the Ohldes now enjoy the fruits of hard work and dedication. Ohlde Cattle Company produces seed stock built on generations of carefully selected genetic traits, making every Ohlde bull and female a balanced trait, low-input success story.
It's kind of a unique operation when a lot of the industry went that way, Ohlde went that way. And he knows how to develop bulls. A lot of bulls have a tendency to fall apart when you get them to the ranch, and that's not a problem with an Ohlde bull.
This is the group of Angus 2 bulls that'll be in our auction. These are sired by different sires, Zodiac, variation a little bit in size. There's some that are extremely good for the grass fattening, some with a little more. You can see what they're eating. This is about 90% haylage with some ground grass hay. And there's like a pound of distillers, and they get about 1.5 pounds of grain screenings, and that's it. This is a group of registered Angus, mostly all black. These will be 2-year-olds. Most all these bulls will be in the sale. You know, all our own kind of pedigrees. There's Zodiacs, Zodiac Grandsons, Legacy, Echelon, Jetstream, Rear End, Big Time, Accolade Sons. You know, basically very line bred to the old 1019 cow. A lot of them will have that cow. She went 21 years old and she'll be in the pedigree on some of these 3, 4, 5 times. A lot of 60 to 70 pound birth weight bulls.
We're cow people and take a lot of pride and put a lot of effort into making heifers that we like. We retain all of our females and we make all of our own cows. They're advertised to be maternal cattle, and that is exactly what they are. They're are moderate framed, they're easy fleshing, they're structurally correct, problem-free cattle.
I think the first bull we bought from him was probably about 85, I would guess. We kept the heifers, and they were easy fleshing, and they still performed, still grew for us, and they were just thick, deep-bodied heifers. I don't know anybody's cattle that are as easy fleshing as Tim Ohldes. I just don't know of a herd of cattle anywhere consistently and calving ease. You can just count on them. We usually like to get some Angus 2 or some Fleck in them, a little bit of outcross, and they're more easy keeping than higher, bigger framed cattle. If the truth were known, I think they're way more efficient in fleshing, even in the feedlot, than bigger framed cattle. But we like that foundation blood in there that he's bred for years and years. That is not large framed, thick, deep bodied. We have no way to measure it, but they take a lot less feed in the winter. And if we have a decent rain year and a decent grass, they'll weigh 650 to 675, our steer calves, in the fall when we ship them. We ship them along the forepart of December, middle of December.
We're in southeastern Idaho, and we have really tough winters. And we think that Ohlde cattle are the best that there is for that. We only feed about half straw and half hay. But our cows are moderate and easy fleshing, and they do well eating straw and the hay that we give them.
Whether it's giving birth, taking care of that calf during the suckling phase, weaning off a calf, and getting rebred. We kind of want that to be a not automatic pilot. I'm not saying that, but with as little labor inputs as possible. And it just seems to me that Tim has those kind of cattle.
If the commercial cattleman can't make a living with his cow herd, then there isn't a beef industry. In order to have females that will stay in a herd and produce year after year, they need to be something that's more easy fleshing, have longevity, and fit into nearly any environment. The selection pressure today of the carcass cattle has taken some of that out of the commercial cattleman's hands, and so many people are not retaining their females, but yet buying them, and they're looking for cattle that are easy fleshing. So many of our customers are selling their extra females either in the form of heifer calves or as bred heifers. They're getting a pretty good premium, sometimes as much as $200 on the bred heifers and 10, 15, 20 cents on the heifer calves over steer price.
So these heifers would bring probably 23 to 2,400 very easily as a group, whereas your average type cattle that may be bigger even would bring 17 to 18 right now. We're saying we want steers that'll bring top market price, but we want the heifer mates to bring more than the steers.
We can sell not only steers that fit the market, but we can also sell our heifer calves or bred heifers at a premium, because many more people today are recognizing that these are the cattle that can bring you production at lower input costs. that whether I'm running 300 or 500 or 1,500 cows or more, those seems to be the cows that are problem-free with less labor inputs. The genetics that he offers for sale, I just believe are unmatched by anybody else that I know of.
We've been very fortunate that the cattle basically sell themselves. And for those people that have went kind of the one direction of the carcass and such, are trying to get some fleshing ability and maternal back into their cattle, and they're going back and using those bulls. But we've used a lot of line breeding, so back and forth with not only those bulls, but other bulls in the 1019 cow and the 6807 lines and so on and so forth. These cattle work for the commercial cattlemen, and so they keep coming back time after time. But oftentimes, many people are scared to use genetics they're not as familiar with because they're afraid what their neighbor might say. Usually neighbors will make fun of another neighbor until it works for somebody. The neighbors look over the fence and see that, gosh, he's not feeding much hay. And I'm driving by every day and I don't see him with a feed truck, and I'm driving by with a feed truck and feeding mine. Well, how is he doing that? Well, he gets with the neighbor and asks him, and he says, well, that's Ohlde Cattle Company genetics.
Join Tim, Trudy, and Jake at Ohlde Ranch in Palmer, Kansas on April 15th for their 34th annual Basic Black Bull and Female Sale. Visit SuperiorLivestock.com for more information, and the sale will also be live on Superior Click-to-Bid. That's all the time we have today. We hope you enjoyed this show. To find out more about us, visit our website, theamericanrancher.com, or connect with us on Facebook. I'm Pam Minnick. For our entire American Rancher team, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.